This is SBS World News with Antoninas.
Good evening. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says the G7 summit is a chance to learn lessons from the coronavirus pandemic and to make sure errors are not repeated. 7 leaders from the so-called advanced economies, Canada, France, Germany, Japan, Italy, the US and the UK, are meeting in person for the first time in 2 years. They've already pledged 1 billion vaccines to help poorer nations. But tonight they'll announce further steps to tackle future health emergencies. Getting down to business after a royal welcome to Cornwall.
When the British government is in need of a diplomatic boost, they call the Queen, even though she doesn't take the protocol and pageantry too seriously these days.
Are you supposed to be looking as if you're enjoying it?
Yes, definitely. We have been enjoying ourselves in spite of appearances.
A royal welcome is something few other countries can provide, so G7 leaders mingled with the monarch and a prince sung their praises.
I just wanted to say, if I may, how much I applaud, for what it's worth, your determination during this G7 summit to create a greener and more prosperous future in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic.
The Queen meeting her 13th US president. Of course, she's not the host of this summit. Boris Johnson is. He's enthusiastic with his elbow bumps. But it was Joe Biden and Emmanuel Macron who looked chummiest on the way into the first G7 session in 2 years.
It is genuinely wonderful to see everybody in person.
The topic, how to build back better from the pandemic.
And building back greener, and building back fairer, and building back more equal, and in a more gender-neutral and perhaps a more feminine way. How about that?
While his country has recorded Europe's highest COVID death toll, the British Prime Minister rarely dwells on his government's failures, making this comment an unexpected one.
We need to make sure that we don't repeat some of the errors that we doubtless made in the course of the last 18 months or so.
The leaders will sign the Carbis Bay Declaration, a pledge to use whatever resources necessary to prevent another pandemic, with plans to slash the time to develop vaccines and treatments to under 100 days, strengthen global genomic sequencing capacity to detect new diseases, and reform the World Health Organization. It's the first of several joint commitments expected to emerge from this summit, which is Angela Merkel's last. The steady hand of Europe happy to meet her latest American counterpart.
Hier dabei ist, Joe Biden zum ersten Mal begegnen zu können, ist natürlich etwas Wichtiges, denn er präsentiert und repräsentiert das Bekenntnis zum Multilateralismus, das uns doch in den letzten Jahren.
Chemistry between leaders is important. During the Donald Trump era, these summits were often wildly unpredictable. On one occasion, he refused to sign the final communique. This current crop of G7 leaders appears to get on well, but there are some key areas of disagreement. All countries will commit to sharing more COVID vaccines with developing nations, but only Presidents Biden and Macron support sharing vaccine patents. While European leaders are angry at Boris Johnson's handling of the Northern Ireland trade dispute. They think he's trying to walk away from the Brexit deal he negotiated and signed. There will be tussles over taxation and climate change commitments too.
For years and years, they've talked, they've met, they've talked, and then they go away and they do nothing. We need them to act rather than just talking about it.
The pandemic not only overshadowing most other issues at this summit, but limiting the number of protesters.
And our chief international correspondent, Ben Lewis, joins us now live from Cornwall. Ben, good evening to you. As we were saying, they're getting down to business. What's on the agenda for today?
Anton, good evening. The world leaders have dined with the royals. They've met the Queen. Now is the time for the real work to begin. Much of the sessions today will be devoted to the pandemic recovery, looking not only at the donation of vaccines to developing nations, but also these plans to try and prevent future pandemics from ever happening. And Melinda Gates will be a guest speaker at one of those sessions. There will also be an entire meeting devoted solely to foreign policy, both countering China economically European when it comes to trade and to pushing back on Russian aggression, both in Ukraine, in Eastern Europe, and in the digital space. And Joe Biden will be looking for a consensus position among G7 leaders that he can take to President Putin when the two meet in a few days' time in Geneva.
Well, our Prime Minister, of course, is a +1 in Cornwall. Who will he be meeting?
It's always difficult being a +1, Anton. He'll be meeting with the South Korean president in a few minutes' time. It has been quite a strange start to the summit for Scott Morrison. His plane was diverted to near Oxford. Weather conditions here were simply out of their control, obviously, and that meant it took him an extra 6 hours to get to the summit venue. So essentially yesterday was a complete write-off. He's been in the UK now for 24 hours and hasn't met with a single foreign leader, although that is going to change today. Of course, he will be hoping to get some one-on-one time with US President Joe Biden, the White House not confirming if that meeting will be possible today.
That is our chief international correspondent, Ben Lewis, updating us live from Cornwall at the G7 summit.